module. So please take note, it's already available on our class card. So please make sure that you have a copy of our module 2. So let me now share my presentation on the screen for a while. Again, please pardon me if ever I cough while I am presenting or talking here inside the Google Meet. I'm still recovering from my sickness. Hopefully, it will not be so distracting, and of course, um, I can still manage to explain it clearly. Okay, so hopefully we're all still safe and healthy and fine wherever we are, and I hope you are, of course, um, make doing your best and making your best, doing your best in terms of our online classes. So hopefully, um, we know what we need to do if ever we get disconnected, or um, we're not able to submit our requirements. Always make sure that you communicate that you initiate communication to your teacher so that you can ask them if ever what are your lacking requirements and so on. Okay, so for this afternoon, our session will be divided again into 6 parts. We have the engage. So again, this is the part wherein we will connect or establish the connection between what we already know, especially what we had for session 1 and for our session this afternoon. And then we will have our objectives. And then we will also have our prior knowledge or testing of our prior knowledge, and then we will have our proper discussion, and hopefully I'll be able to introduce to you our worksheet for this afternoon, and then of course our expectation for the next 2 sessions. So let's begin with our engagement, or the engaged part of our session. So yesterday we started our module with first establishing the relationship or the interconnectedness between the two organ system, namely respiratory and the circulatory system. So from that discussion, we've learned that the respiratory system acts as the source of the essential gas, and at the same time the organ system that is responsible for the removal of waste gas such as in the form of carbon dioxide. But what makes what is the organ system that is responsible for distributing the oxygen and other materials to the different parts of the body, that is now the role of the circulatory system. So just like you have a factory, then you have, of course, your groceries, wherein the groceries are just a venue wherein um, goods and products are made available for everyone, for us to avail or buy or purchase. So here you can see that the respiratory system the respiratory and the circulatory system works hand in hand in a way that the heart is the pumping organ that creates the pressure or the movement that is necessary so that blood will flow throughout the different parts of the body. Now, as you can see here on the diagram, our blood is not color coded in blue or red, but of course, this is just for the sake of us to differentiate the the type of blood that is being carried by that specific pathway or passage. Okay, so if it's red, the that means that that particular passage carries what we call as oxygenated blood or oxygen rich blood. But if a passageway is shaded in blue, that means this particular passageway or route carries what we call as deoxygenated blood or oxygen poor blood or oxygen depleted blood. So that means the red one is considered carrying the oxygen supply or new supply of oxygen, and the blue one is now carrying a lesser supply of oxygen, more concentrated on carbon dioxide. So now that we have more or less established the connection, at the same time the unique jobs of each of these organ system, we will now focus specifically on one of the organ system, namely the respiratory system. So we will know the mechanics behind or the dynamics behind what happens when we breathe in and what happens when we breathe out. So as you can see here, this is actually a side view of uh, a cross section, the same time a dorsal view of a person while he is inhaling or taking a breath, inhalation, and what happens also when the person is exhaling. So as you can see here, that the lung capacity when you inhale is bigger or larger, while the lung capacity when you exhale is constricted or is smaller. Uh, okay. So this is now our topic for this afternoon, the human respiratory system, specifically on page 3 to 12. So let's start. So what are the things we need to take note for this afternoon? So of course, the terms and processes for the respiratory system, the different parts of the respiratory system, and specifically the work of respiratory system. So let's now begin our prior knowledge. So here I have prepared, okay, so this is a cross section of a person. As you can see, there are points. Okay, so there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think naapay nasa ubos. And on each point, as you can see here at a specific time, this is the one that is being pointed out. Now, you have here four options, okay? So based on these options, what do you think is the name of that part that is being highlighted here? Okay, so if anyone who wants to try to identify that part, simply raise your hand and then I will call your name so that you will be acknowledged and then you can give your answer. So here for the first um highlighted part, we have here the options are bronchioles, alveoli, pharynx, and frontal sinus. Who wants to try for this part? Yes, Miles.
Kanang nasa taas siya daw, ano,
Bronchioles. Is this
ay, pharynx ako nag-check.
pharynx? This one I don't know. I mean, this is the one that is being highlighted, Miles, and these are your options for the possible answers. Which do you think is this part? One, two, three, or four? Can you see? Let me expand and make it larger para makita. Okay, what do you think is or what's your guess? Again, please take note. You're not expected to really know this already or master this already, but this is just to test if you have more or less at least an idea. So you can guess more than one time. You can have a guess two time. Yes, Miles, do you have a guess? Or should I call another person?
Into the lipo ko, aha, ang kanang kwan siya, violet na.
This one, yes, this one, the one in purple, kind of siya na area. Is it bronchioles, alveoli, pharynx, or frontal sinus? Which is your guess?
Pass lang sa
Okay, pass. Okay, let's call it Rupert. Okay, Rupert, you want
Sir,
to try
bronchioles, sir.
bronchioles? Let's check if your guess is correct. Oh, yes, this is correct. Okay, thank you, Rupert, for that. Okay, let's move to another section of the picture. So this time, what the highlighted part is this one. So which do you think is this one? Is this the heart, the oral cavity, the frontal sinus, or the larynx? Yes, Miles?
Larry.
Okay, let's try your guess. Yes, that's correct. Thank you. Okay, this time we are going up here in this area. Anyone who wants to try? Is this the alveoli, oral cavity, bronchus, or bronchioles? Yes, Isa.
Oral cavity.
Okay, let's check. Yes, that is correct. Thank you. Okay, this time we are here on this part. Anyone who wants to try? We have options are middle lobe, pharynx, bronchus, or superior lobe. Okay, we have another Rupert.
Pharynx, sir.
Let's see if that is pharynx. Yes, that is indeed pharynx. Okay, thank you for that, Rupert. Okay, here, let's go down. Okay, we have Marinelle.
Trachea.
Trachea. Okay, let's try that guess. Marinelle. Yes, that is indeed a trachea. Okay, anybody else? We have this time we go higher again. Okay, this time we have Miles. Yes, Miles.
Nasal cavity.
Let's click that if that is indeed the nasal cavity. Sorry. Okay, there. Yes, it is the nasal cavity. I think we are down to the last three. Okay, here. Okay, let me check. Based on the cue, let me see the cue. Okay, we have Rupert.
Diaphragm, sir.
Okay, diaphragm. Let's click that one. Yes, that is indeed the diaphragm. Okay, anybody else? Okay, this time we are on this one, lowered to the trachea. Your options are either larynx, nasal cavity, sphenoid, sphenoid sinus, or bronchus. Yes, who wants to try? Just activate your raise hand button so that I can call your name. Yes, Marinelle.
Bronchus, sir.
Let's try. It's if it's bronchus. Yes, that is correct. And lastly, we have here this one here, the circle. Is this the oral cavity, alveoli, heart, or diaphragm? Yes, Rupert.
Alveoli, sir.
Okay, let's click that if it's the correct name for that part of the respiratory system. Okay, very good. So we're able to identify. Let me zoom out. I zoom in. Okay, so that we can see all the parts. So we have nasal cavity, oral cavity, pharynx, larynx, trachea, bronchus, bronchioles, alveoli, and diaphragm. Okay, let me go back to the presentation. Okay, thank you so much for those who participated. So the respiratory system is actually divided into two major parts. We have the upper respiratory tract, and then we have the lower respiratory tract. Now, sometimes the boundary between the two parts or subparts are debatable. Sometimes they include trachea as part of the um, upper, and sometimes it's in some references it's also considered as lower, but for that sake we just know that um the respiratory disease the respiratory tract is divided into two, upper and lower. So it begins with the two cavities. We have the nasal and oral cavity. So of course this is this a cavity it means it's a space, it's a hollow space wherein of course, certain materials are allowed to pass through. So in this case, we have the oral, that's the mouth, and then the nasal, which is of course for our nose. Now, the major difference is here is that nasal cavity is the primary, or the nose is the primary opening for the respiratory system. What makes it the primary is, of course, number one, there is a filtering system built in inside the nasal cavity. That's why there are fine hairs that acts as filters for other impurities or mga fragments that might be mixing sa atong gina-inhale na air. At the same time, the nasal cavity is also where the air is the temperature of the air is being regulated. Our body, our internal temperature is hotter compared to our environment or the temperature outside our body. So please take note of that. So that's why it needs to be regulated, acclimated, para it will match the temperature inside our body. And then we have the pharynx. Probably you've heard of this when you learn the digestive system because this is the common passageway between among the food, water, and air. Below that is then we have the larynx. This is considered as the voice box, which enables us to produce a wide range of sound. The human voice is actually very unique because we can imitate or mimic voice of other organism. At the same time, we can also mimic um, sounds of other instrument. Kanina yung uban na gina very talented. At the same time, of course, especially sa mga Pilipino, mahilig kaayo mag-videoke. Nabirit talaga ang pagkanta sa mga videoke. We take videoke seriously like kanang pang angin siya. And then of course, we have the trachea, which is considered as the windpipe. This is now one of the major organs sa respiratory system. And as you can see here, compared to the lining, to the structure here from the nasal cavity until to the larynx, you will notice that there are ridges sa trachea. That's actually made up of cartilages, just like the material found on your ear. It's sturdy enough but not as sturdy as the bones. Flexible pa rin siya. Now, why we have cartilages surrounding the trachea? It prevents it from collapsing or closing. So that means your trachea is always open 24/7 because the moment it collapses, it can then the passage of air may be restricted. So pwede na that can be fatal to a person. So munang na siya specific na siya structure na cartilage or a group of cartilages so that it maintains na open siya all the time. And then we have, of course, just below the trachea, we have the bronchi. That's plural, bronchus for singular. This is now the two main branches from the trachea, and this actually leads to left or right lung. And then narrower than the bronchus, you have your bronchioles. At the end of each bronchioles, you have your alveoli or the air sac wherein the gas exchange happens. And then lastly, we have the diaphragm. This is the structure that helps the lungs um, expand, and at the same time, it helps the lungs contract. Later on, we'll learn more of that. So, for our video this afternoon, we will be watching it for the next part of our session. But here are the guide questions that we'd like to answer. Number one is, how do you describe the pathway of air starting from the nose or mouth to the alveoli? And then we have, what happens specifically in the alveoli? So let us watch first the video. Okay, let me first stop sharing and then share it. Okay.
In this video, we're going to look at the function and the structure of the lungs, and at how the alveoli are adapted to carry out gas exchange. In order to get the energy that they need to function, all of our cells must carry out the process of cellular respiration. And for that, they need oxygen. And this is where the lungs come in. Their role is to get the oxygen that we need from the air all around us into our bloodstream, where it can be transported to the rest of the body. Whenever we breathe in, air first passes through our mouth or our nose and then down our trachea, which is also known as the windpipe. From there, it divides between our two bronchi and then further divides between successive branch-like structures, which we call bronchioles. Once the air has made its way through all of these branches, it reaches these small sacs that are arranged like bunches of grapes. These sacs are called alveoli, and they're the site of gas exchange. Let's wipe all of this out and have a closer look at a single one of the alveoli, which we call an alveolus. The first thing to notice is that the alveoli are made up of just one layer of very thin cells, just like the blood capillaries that they're next to. This creates a really short diffusion pathway, which increases the rate that carbon dioxide and oxygen can diffuse across. Something that you can't see very well on this picture is that alveoli have a very large surface area. This is because instead of just having one, like we see here, adults actually have hundreds of millions of alveoli. And if they were all spread out flat, they would cover half a tennis court. Another feature is that the alveolar walls are moist, which allows the gases to dissolve, and this increases their rate of diffusion. Now, the blood in the capillaries that we see here has just returned to the lungs, having passed around the body. So the hemoglobin within the red blood cells will have already given up lots of its oxygen to the tissues, meaning that there won't be much left, which is why we've shown them as being blue. And as the alveoli are full of fresh oxygen, we have the perfect concentration gradient, by which the oxygen in the alveoli can diffuse down that gradient into the blood. And then our nice oxygenated blood can start the cycle all over again. The carbon dioxide, on the other hand, will be at a higher concentration in the blood than the alveoli, so it can easily diffuse across. And once in the alveoli, we can just breathe it out. Now, although we showed it in this picture, it's important to remember that carbon dioxide isn't actually carried by red blood cells, like oxygen is. It's just dissolved in the blood plasma. One other thing that we wanted to point out is that everything we've shown here is happening continually, all the time. The blood keeps on moving throughout the entire process, with a constant supply of deoxygenated blood entering the capillaries and oxygenated blood leaving it. Now, you've probably noticed that when you do exercise, your breathing rate changes. And you could be asked to calculate this breathing rate and give your answer in breaths per minute. It's a pretty easy equation though. You just divide the number of breaths taken by the time in minutes that those breaths took. So if you took 42 breaths in 3 minutes, your breathing rate would be 14 breaths per minute. Anyway, that covers everything you need to know about the lungs. Hope you
Okay, now that we have seen that very short video, let's now go to our guide questions. But before that, let's first establish what do we mean when we say respiration. Okay, so sometimes respiration can be interchangeably under used in different um, situations. So let's first understand that when you talk about respiration, this is the um, overall exchange of gases between not only the body but also it involves the atmosphere, the environment outside our body, the blood, and our cells. So respiration is confused sometimes with breathing, but that these two concepts are related but not necessarily the same, right? So respiration in land vertebrates, just like mammals, humans, um, are actually divided into four phases. Number one, we have breathing or ventilation, or we know it as inhalation. So this is the act actually of a combination of two process. It's the act of taking in air in the form of inspiration or inhalation, and then we have taking out of air from the lungs. We call it expiration. So that's the physical action of getting in air and taking out the air. Next is we have the external respiration. So when you talk about external re- res- respiration, this is the exchange of oxygen at the same time carbon dioxide, but this is between the air from the outside or the external environment, the blood between the lungs. So that's outside and then until the lungs. But when you talk about internal respiration, this is now the gas exchange from the lungs to the different parts of the body. Okay, so again, internal respiration, that's from the atmosphere, from the external environment outside our body, and the lungs. While the internal respiration, this is the same idea, it's a gas exchange, but this is between the lungs or the blood in the lungs and then to the body cells or the different parts of the body. And then when you talk about cellular respiration, this is now what we've learned previously, that the breaking of um, glucose into ATP, which is the form of chemical energy that is recognized by the body. And in the process, oxygen is necessary for this, while the product or the byproduct is carbon dioxide, which is considered as a waste. So these are the four phases of the respiration. So how do you describe the pathway of air from the nose to the mouth? So looking at this, you will notice that the pathway is actually linear or one, right? So it all begins with the nasal cavity. I think I mentioned this already. And then why the nasal cavity is considered their primary, because that's where filtration or the cleaning of air happens. But of course, if your nasal cavity is blocked or constricted, then the mouth is an alternative route for air. But of course, it's not ideal because since mouth does not have the filtering system like the nasal cavity. And then we have the pharynx. This is the common passageway for food, water, and air. And then we have the larynx, which allows us to produce our unique voice. And then we have the trachea, the windpipe, the main pathway for the it's a pathway now, it's a specific pathway that's solely dedicated for air. Dili mo agi diri ang food, dili pod mo agi diri ang water. The water and air goes to the esophagus. That's why when you, 'di ba, there is a saying that we don't talk when your mouth is we don't talk when your mouth is full or you are eating. Have you experienced na you are you are chewing at the same time you are talking, and midway on that na ay mo gawas na morsel of food sa imong ilong? Have anyone na naka-experience ana na naay murag mo gawas? It's because that's our not body's natural response, that in the event that there's even a morsel of food or any food particle na makasulod sa windpipe, it will push it out sa atong nose pabalik pagawas, because the windpipe is solely dedicated for air. Okay, once food particles go to the trachea, it can actually scratch the lining, and it can also cause damage to the other lower parts sa imuhang respiratory system. And then, of course, we have the bronchus or the bronchi. And then, you have the bronchioles. alveolus, and then the diaphragm. So what happens in the alveoli? So what happens specifically on one specific air sac? So I have here an animation. So anyone who can describe what you notice on the animation. By the way, you take note. You have here the legend. The s- yel- the white circles, they represent oxygen, while the black circles are the carbon dioxide. So this is the alveoli. This is a blood vessel, specifically a capillary, very close or almost attached to the alveoli. So what do you see happening on the animation? Anyone who wants to try to describe based
The
on what
take
you
of oxygen, then exhale din ang carbon dioxide.
Okay, very good. So, based on what I heard is that you will notice that here, especially on this side, you will notice that the color of your red blood cells are changing. It started with the maroonish here, but when it goes to this side, nahimo siyang red. Um, according to Miles, nag-pick up siya og oxygen, and then it's also leaving the carbon dioxide back to the alveoli. So in a sense, it is replenishing its oxygen supply and removing the carbon dioxide in the bloodstream. Now you'll see that it happens simultaneously. Okay, so what do you mean by simultaneously? It happens almost at the same time. So dili siya na nagkuha lang oxygen, wala gi-remove ang carbon dioxide. It must happen simultaneously. Excuse me for a while. Okay. So this time, do you have any questions, clarifications regarding our discussion? We will now proceed to our evaluation part. Okay. So you need to go to our, sorry. Okay, you need to go to our class card. Okay, sorry for that. So kindly go to our class card. You will find under the activities tab. Okay, worksheet number 1 is already uploaded for you. So what you need to do is, let me click the instruction first. So let me read the instruction. Click the file below. Of course, if you click this will allow you to download the copy of the activity. Please read the instruction on the file and follow them carefully. Once you have accomplished the task, you need to rename the file using your family name and then section. So, accomplish the worksheet according to the instruction. Once you are ready to submit, you need to upload your accomplished worksheet either in MS Word or in PDF format, whichever is available and convenient for you, and then click submit. All right. So you will notice here. Please take a look at. Give your attention here. So the published date is today, right? But the deadline is actually tomorrow until 5 p.m. tomorrow. All right? So that means you have the remaining time now, which is roughly 10 minutes. And then, of course, you can finish that during your most convenient time until 5 p.m. tomorrow. Okay, any questions or clarification regarding the worksheet number 1? None so far. Okay, so you may I suggest you start it now, or at least download the file so that you have already the file with you and with you to work on later. And then um if you can submit earlier than 5 p.m. tomorrow, then also the better, right? So that you don't need to worry about this later on. Okay? Okay, sorry for that. Before I leave the class, please take note, at the end of this session, we actually have our worksheet number 1, the parts and function for the respiratory system. It's already on our class card, so please make sure visit our class card so that you can download a copy of the file. And then accomplished it, you are given until 5 p.m. tomorrow for the submission of the said tasks. And then for tomorrow, we will now have our section number 3. This time we'll focus on the circulatory system. All right. So please take note of that. Now, before I leave the class, I have not heard any news regarding sa inyong health or well-being regarding sa naabay nagsakit sa ato here sa 9H. Anyone na is not feeling well so far? Um, everybody pa man
Last week lang, sir.
I'm sorry, Marinelle. Kindly repeat
Not
your
currently, sir, per last week.
yes, your last week. But 'di ba majority I think murag common siya na that not necessarily na COVID, but I mean daghan gyud nag experience na cough and colds, especially starting last week and this week dayon. Naabay, nagsakit. Wala ka ba, no? Alright. So, um, so let me just announce something. Since the month is about to end na and we're starting another month next week. So February 1 is actually a holiday, Chinese New Year, right? So that's I think a Tuesday. Okay, so that means Tuesday next week you don't have a class or we don't have a class. Then February 25, that's actually EDSA Revolution. So that's another holiday. And based on what I know already, that the schedule for our third quarter exam is actually on Feb 17 to 18. Okay, so that means Feb 17 to 18. Then after that, we will have our wellness week. That is, of course, if walay major changes in terms of our school calendar. Okay, so let me repeat that. Feb 1, that's a Chinese New Year. It's a holiday. Feb 25, that's also a holiday. That's EDSA Revolution. And then on Feb 17 and 18, that's the third quarter exam. I do not know yet the exact subjects assigned for each day. And then a week after that will be our wellness week. So again, these schedules are more or less the schedules for Feb based on our school calendar. But in terms of it actually happening, we do not know yet, especially that there have been alarming and increasing number of um, cases here in Cagayan de Oro. We are actually number one na are in northern or from northern Mindanao. Right? So always stay safe, everyone. If possible, kanang kuan lang gyud ta, be vigilant lang and everything. And at the same time, always um, take your vitamins, boost your immunity, and hopefully, I think majority naman here, right? Naka at least naka vaccination na, right? So hopefully that will already help us prevent more cases. All right. So are there concerns, questions na aba?
Not sure.
Thank you, Miles. How about the rest of the class? Are there concerns?
Hi, sir. Regarding sa theme sa photoshoot, sir.
Yes, yes. So it was not yet agreed. Actually, I'm still waiting on you sa class. Kung naaba mo i-decide.
Namin na ano sir sa
Yes,
GC namo kanang
yes,
mo na lang din nahulatan sir is their responses kay gamay ra
Responses, sir.
nag-respond
Gamay ra
kung
na
Ah,
kung gusto.
okay.
response.
So please take note. There has been a poll. I mean a poll, right? I think. Please just the Miles, Marinel, and would like to ask for your kanang cooperation as the form of in the form of kanang responding to the options there so that we can agree on our aesthetic or theme for the informal because I believe we have already agreed that the deadline of that will be on February 4. Am I right? Sakto ba? Agree naman na to last time.
Sure.
So that means, please take note the February 4 deadline is already for both the formal and informal na post. And take note, when you submit your post, it doesn't mean that that's already considered approved, okay? I still need to go through the individual images and verify if it really followed the specs that was um, instructed to us to follow. So again, as I think I mentioned this before, na please don't take it personally if I ask you to redo it if ever it does not follow the specification or does not fit the specification. Yes, Miles?
Sure, nagpuwag mi sa mong nagpuwag mi sa mong GC, sure, then wala pa naka-answer tanan, sure, per majority vote, mostly, sure, is kaming darker theme, hamot, sure, which is, murag mafia, bitaw, sure, na may sunglasses, may suit, sure, blackish,
I'm not sure. I'll ask first kung allowed ba ang sana
o siya mafia theme, sure, na,
glasses.
yes,
Na red
sunglasses,
suit,
sure,
dark
may
Ah,
suit,
suit,
inga na siya.
dark suits siya. Send
okay.
ko, reference picture.
Okay, sige, sige. So that I can also give it as a reference sa kuan. Kung okay ra ba siya na theme pod sa katong mga insured sa class pictures. If okay ba mag-wear og sunglasses, okay? Sa informal, right? I'll wait for that, Miles. Okay?
And I send na
So,
ko siya.
okay. Okay, time check. It's now 1:20 in the afternoon. So I'll leave now the Google Meet so your next teacher can join. Take care and God bless everyone. Stay safe. See you tomorrow. Sorry. Bye.